She stole my husband and sued me for money. The betrayal that walked into court. The courthouse in Redwood City didn't feel real that morning. It smelled like cold marble, old paper, and decisions that couldn't be undone. I remember thinking how strange it was that some buildings seemed to breathe, as if the walls had absorbed decades of broken promises and whispered confessions. I walked in alone, no hand to hold, no one waiting for me. And then I saw them. My younger cousin Lena was already seated inside the courtroom, her fingers tightly wrapped around Nathan's hand, my husband's hand, the same hand that once promised to protect me, the same hand that used to brush my hair back when I couldn't sleep. She stood as though she'd earned the place beside him, not guilty, not ashamed, proud. The room went silent when she spoke. "You can contribute financially," she said evenly, "or you can step out of the way." She didn't stutter, she didn't hesitate. Behind her, my parents were already choosing her version of the truth. I watched my mother shift closer to Lena, instinctively placing herself between her and the world. My father leaned forward, his expression stiff, as if bracing for an inconvenience rather than witnessing betrayal. They didn't look at me. They were waiting for me to fall apart. They had spent my whole life waiting for that moment, the moment I'd finally crack, finally prove I wasn't as strong as they insisted I was. I could feel their expectations pressing into my chest. So, I smiled. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was calm. And in that single moment, every assumption they'd ever made about me became their biggest mistake, because they thought this was the end of my story. They didn't know it was the beginning of theirs. The family that taught me to disappear. People always described me the same way growing up. Evelyn is so mature. Evelyn doesn't need help. She's strong. She'll be fine. I learned early that strength was rewarded with neglect. While other kids were allowed to be messy and loud and emotional, I learned how to be useful instead. I learned how to clean everything quietly, how to fix problems without acknowledgement, how not to ask for more because more was never coming. Lena was different. Lena cried beautifully. If she broke a dish, she cried. And suddenly it was everyone else's fault for leaving it too close to the edge. If she failed a test, she cried. And someone argued that the teacher must have been unfair. If she lied, she cried harder, and the lie dissolved into sympathy. And every time I was told to be understanding. "She's sensitive," my mother would whisper, pulling Lena into her arms. "And you're not?" I asked once. My father sighed like I'd exhausted him. "You don't need as much," he said. That sentence followed me for the rest of my life. I cleaned while Lena sparkled. I stayed quiet while Lena was protected. I learned that reliability was not the same as love. When Nathan entered my life years later, he said my calm steadiness was what drew him in. "You make the world feel manageable," he told me once, lying beside me in our apartment in San Mateo. I believed that. I married him because I thought peace meant safety. I didn't realize peace could be used as a weapon. Slowly, quietly, he began to describe me the way my family always had. Composed, detached, distant. And Lena started to appear more often. She came over just to talk. She stayed late because she was tired. She lingered in our kitchen while Nathan cooked, laughing a little too loudly. At first, I told myself I was imagining it, because that's what strong women do. We gaslight ourselves before anyone else has to. The story they wrote about me. The betrayal didn't announce itself. It whispered. Late-night conversations stopped when I entered the room. Inside jokes I wasn't included in. Nathan defending Lena in arguments that never involved her. I found her perfume in our bathroom, convinced myself it was left over from a visit. I found unfamiliar laundry, accepted his shrug like it was reasonable. The first time I felt it, really felt it, was during a family dinner. My mother stared at Lena with a warmth that felt rehearsed. My father asked Nathan how he was holding up, with all Evelyn is pressure. Pressure. I sat there frozen, fork hovering mid-air, realizing the narrative was changing without me. I wasn't part of the discussion. I was the subject. When Lena announced her pregnancy, she cried. Of course she did. My mother rushed to her so fast it looked practiced. Nathan stood behind her, hand on her shoulder. No one looked at me. Not once. And that's when I understood something terrifying. The affair didn't break my family. It simply revealed which side they'd always be on. The role switch. After the pregnancy announcement, everything shifted. My parents called more often, not to check on me, but to update them on Lena's emotional state. Nathan started speaking for me. She's been overwhelmed lately, he told them, knowing I could hear him. She hasn't been herself. Lena nodded quietly beside him like a grieving guardian. Soon, I was hearing stories about myself that made no sense. I'd cried at work. I'd snapped at strangers. I'd forgotten obligations. None of it was true. But none of it needed to be, because my family had already decided who they wanted me to be. The night my mother said, "We're worried about you," I realized something had snapped. I was no longer the dependable daughter. I was the liability. The court notice. The envelope arrived like a slap. A legal notice. A petition for financial support. From my husband. From my cousin. They claimed I was the most stable adult involved, the most financially capable, the most responsible. They wanted me to fund the child conceived behind my back. I went to my parents' house, hoping, stupidly, for outrage. Instead, my father stood firm. "You make good money," he said. "You can help." My mother folded her arms. "The baby is innocent." Lena stepped forward, one hand on her stomach, Nathan's fingers entwined with hers. "We're building a life," she said softly. "You can support us or step aside." That was when the anger finally crystallized. Not violent, not explosive, focused. They didn't know who they'd been training me to become my whole life. Silence is not surrender. That night, my apartment felt hollow. I sat on the floor in the dark for a long time, knees drawn close. Not crying, calculating. They had mistaken my restraint for emptiness. So I gathered evidence, text histories, timestamps, travel records, messages where Nathan described manipulating perceptions, messages where Lena bragged about winning. My elderly neighbor confirmed seeing Nathan at Lena's apartment months before I even suspected. By dawn, the truth lay spread across my table like a map. They thought I was quiet because I didn't fight. They forgot, quiet people are dangerous when pushed. The courtroom collapse. On the day of the hearing, Lena held Nathan's hand like a trophy. My parents sat behind them, unified. The judge listened to their claims, then turned to me. I stood, and I told the truth, slowly, thoroughly, without emotion. I presented contradictions, proof, timelines. The room shifted with every document. By the time I finished, the judge didn't look surprised. The petition was denied. Further review ordered. My parents looked lost. Nathan looked small. Lena finally cried. Real tears this time. I closed my folder, and walked away. What freedom feels like. Outside the courthouse, the air felt clean. Not victorious. Free. I didn't respond to my mother's message. Some betrayals don't earn closure, only distance. I wasn't abandoning them. I was choosing myself. They mistook my silence for weakness. They mistook my calm for surrender. But strength isn't loud, and revenge doesn't always rage. Sometimes it simply tells the truth. Subscribe to Clara's Revenge, where quiet women reclaim their stories. If this story felt familiar, share yours below.